ExamPrep.School. Massachusetts Producers Exam for Casualty Insurance. Exam code SERIES 16-54. There are 4 practice exams in this series. This video covers Practice Exam 1. The first 20 questions are free. In this video, we will be covering the following major categories for Practice Exam 1. Auto insurance, business owner's policy, casualty insurance basics, commercial package policy, general insurance, homeowner's policy, insurance regulation, other coverages and options, workers' compensation insurance. Let's walk through the format. I'll read each question and its choices. Let's get started. Question 1. In Massachusetts, before sitting for the casualty line pre-licensing examination, a resident producer applicant must complete at least how many hours of approved pre-licensing education for that line of authority? A. 10 hours. B. 30 hours. C. 25 hours. D. 20 hours. A countdown circle appears in the top right. Once it completes, the answer is revealed. You can pause at any time if you'd like longer to think. If you'd like additional practice covering more topics, see the description for our book. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is 20 hours because Massachusetts mandates a minimum of 20 hours of approved pre-licensing education for each line of authority. Reason A is not correct. 10 hours is below the state minimum. Massachusetts requires at least 20 hours per line of authority. Reason B is not correct. 30 hours is above what Massachusetts regulations specify as the minimum. Reason C is not correct. 25 hours exceed the mandated minimum requirement of 20 hours. Question 2. Under Massachusetts reciprocity provisions, a non-resident producer holding a casualty insurance license in the home state is exempt from which licensing requirement? A. Completing Massachusetts pre-licensing education. B. Passing the Massachusetts licensing examination. C. Submitting a Massachusetts fingerprint-based background check. D. Establishing Massachusetts residency. The correct answer is B. The correct answer is exemption from passing the licensing examination, as reciprocity waives the exam for non-resident licensees already licensed in their home state. Reason A is not correct. Pre-licensing education remains required under reciprocity and is not waived. Reason C is not correct. Fingerprint-based background checks are still required for non-resident applicants. Reason D is not correct. Residency requirements are not established through reciprocity and still apply. Question 3. A Massachusetts casualty-only producer license authorizes solicitation of most casualty coverages. Which of the following is not within the scope of this license? A. Workers' compensation insurance. B. Private passenger auto liability. C. Surety bond insurance. D. Homeowner's property insurance. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is homeowner's property insurance, because that coverage falls under the property line of authority, not casualty. Reason A is not correct. Workers' compensation is a casualty coverage included under the casualty line of authority. Reason B is not correct. Private passenger auto liability is a casualty coverage permissible under that license. Reason C is not correct. Surety bonds fall under the casualty line of authority and are authorized. Question 4. Resident insurance producer licenses in Massachusetts expire on which of the following dates? A. June 30th of even-numbered years. B. June 30th of odd-numbered years. C. Licensee's birth date every 2 years. D. Anniversary of original issue date every 2 years. The correct answer is B. The correct answer is June 30th of odd-numbered years, as Massachusetts sets expiration for resident producer licenses on that fixed biennial date. Reason A is not correct. Even-numbered years are incorrect since the schedule is tied to odd-numbered years. Reason C is not correct. Renewal is not based on an individual birth date schedule. Reason D is not correct. Expirations are not tied to the original issue anniversary. Question 5. Maria Rodriguez, a Massachusetts licensed casualty producer, realizes on June 30th, her license renewal date, that she has only completed 20 of the 24 required continuing education hours, including no ethics credit. Under Massachusetts regulations, what must she do to remain in compliance? A. Cease all insurance transactions immediately until completing the remaining CE hours and renewing the license. B. Submit a request for a 30-day extension from the commissioner to finish the deficient CE hours. C. Report the CE shortfall on the renewal application and pay a late submission penalty fee. D. File a waiver application for the ethics requirement prior to license renewal. The correct answer is A. A producer whose license has expired due to CE deficiency must stop all insurance activity and cannot renew until all required hours, including ethics, are completed. Massachusetts law does not provide routine CE extensions or waivers. Reason B is not correct. Massachusetts does not allow a standardized CE extension request to complete deficient hours after the renewal date. Reason C is not correct. There is no process for reporting a CE deficiency on the renewal form or paying a penalty to maintain or reinstate the license. Reason D is not correct. No waiver process exists for core CE requirements. All hours, including ethics, must be completed for renewal. Question 6. Under Massachusetts general laws, Chapter 175, Section 4, the Commissioner of Insurance has the authority to A. Levy criminal sanctions against insurers for violations of the insurance code. B. Promulgate regulations necessary to enforce and interpret insurance statutes. C. Adjudicate private contract disputes between insurers and insureds. D. Serve as the underwriter of last resort in the residual market. The correct answer is B. The Commissioner is empowered by MGL.75 Section 4 to adopt and promulgate regulations to enforce and clarify insurance laws. Reason A is not correct. Criminal penalties are imposed by courts, not directly levied by the Commissioner. Reason C is not correct. Contract disputes are resolved in civil court, not by administrative order. Reason D is not correct. The Commissioner does not underwrite policies or assume residual market risk. Question 7. The primary objective of a market conduct examination of insurers and producers in Massachusetts is to A. Evaluate the adequacy of surplus and reserves held by insurers. B. Verify compliance with underwriting, rating, and claims practices under state law. C. Assess the profitability of individual producers' sales performance. D. Audit financial statements to detect liquidity risks. The correct answer is B. Market conduct exams focus on an insurer's and producer's compliance with state laws governing underwriting, rating, marketing, and claims handling. Reason A is not correct. Financial examinations, not market conduct exams, assess surplus and reserve adequacy. Reason C is not correct. Profitability analysis of producers is outside the scope of market conduct reviews. Reason D is not correct. Liquidity risks are evaluated in financial solvency examinations rather than market conduct exams. Question 8. According to Massachusetts insurance law, an example of unfair discrimination in underwriting and rating is A. Charging auto insurance premiums that reflect differences in driving record. B. Applying territory rate factors based on credible actuarial data. C. Refusing to issue life insurance solely because of the applicant's race. D. Using loss history to determine commercial property rates. The correct answer is C. Unfair discrimination prohibits basing underwriting, or rates solely on protected classifications such as race without actuarial justification. Reason A is not correct. Adjusting premiums for driving record is actuarially justified, not unfair. Reason B is not correct. Territorial factors based on credible data are permitted underwriting considerations. Reason D is not correct. Using loss history as a valid rating factor supported by past experience. Question 9. Which of the following is considered a prohibited unfair claim settlement practice under Massachusetts regulations? A. Failing to promptly acknowledge and begin investigation of a claim. B. Negotiating a reduced settlement when claimant refuses to undergo examination. C. Requiring proof of loss within the time specified in policy provisions. D. Communicating with claimants through authorized legal representatives only. The correct answer is A. Regulations bar insurers from unreasonably delaying acknowledgement and investigation of claims, which undermines fair claim handling. Reason B is not correct. Settlement negotiation after refusal of exam is allowed if the insured declines examination. Reason C is not correct. Requiring proof of loss within policy timeframes is a contractual right, not prohibited. Reason D is not correct. Communicating through legal representatives is permissible when claimants elect representation. Question 10. Which of the following behaviors by an applicant or claimant is most indicative of potential fraud in a casualty insurance application or claim? A. Requesting multiple deadline extensions during the claims process without evidence of extenuating circumstances. B. Providing medical reports from practitioners whose credentials cannot be verified. C. Reporting minor inconsistencies in the chronology of events attributed to memory lapses. D. Presenting forged repair invoices that substantially exceed the actual work performed. The correct answer is D. This option is correct because the intentional fabrication of supporting documents, such as inflated or forged invoices, is a primary red flag for fraudulent casualty claims, whereas the other behaviors are more indicative of administrative delays or unverified information rather than deliberate misrepresentation. Reason A is not correct. Extending deadlines may indicate disorganization or procedural issues, but does not demonstrate intentional misrepresentation of loss details. Reason B is not correct. Unverified credentials suggest due diligence concerns but are less direct evidence of purposeful falsification of claim facts. Reason C is not correct. Minor memory inconsistencies can occur innocently and are not as suggestive of deliberate fraud as fabricated invoices. Question 11. Under Massachusetts regulations, if an insurance producer suspects that an application contains intentionally misleading information, which of the following actions must the producer take? A. Reject the application and retain any earned commission from the transaction. B. Notify both the insurer and the commissioner of insurance about the suspicion. C. Inform the applicant that a criminal investigation will be initiated immediately. D. Submit the application as presented but include a written note expressing concern. The correct answer is B. This option is correct because Massachusetts law requires producers to report any suspicion of fraudulent or intentionally misleading information to both their insurer and the state's commissioner of insurance, ensuring proper investigation rather than unilateral rejection or informal notes. Reason A is not correct. Retaining commission after rejection does not satisfy legal reporting obligations and may conflict with fiduciary duties. Reason C is not correct. Threatening a criminal investigation bypasses regulatory reporting channels and could expose the producer to liability. Reason D is not correct. Submitting with a note without formal notification fails to trigger the required regulatory investigation procedures. Question 12. After reviewing a completed commercial liability application, a Massachusetts insurance producer notes discrepancies suggesting the applicant may have inflated prior claim amounts. Under Massachusetts law, what is the producer's best course of action? A. Document the findings in the applicant's file and await further confirmation before taking any action. B. Notify the insurer's underwriting department and allow the insurer to determine whether to report. C. Promptly report the suspicion to the Massachusetts Division of Insurance within 30 days of discovery. D. Consult with the applicant for clarification and, if unresolved, escalate to the agency's compliance officer. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is to report the suspicion directly to the Massachusetts Division of Insurance within 30 days, as producers have an independent statutory duty to notify the regulator of any suspected insurance fraud. Reason A is not correct. Simply documenting and waiting does not satisfy the statutory requirement to report suspected fraud within the prescribed timeframe. Reason B is not correct. Relying solely on the insurer to report neglects the producer's own obligation under state law to notify the Division of Insurance. Reason D is not correct. Internal escalation delays the mandatory report to the regulatory authority and does not fulfill the producer's duty under the statute. Question 13. Which statement correctly distinguishes pure risk from speculative risk? A. Pure risk refers to exposures with unquantifiable outcomes that cannot be protected by insurance. B. Pure risk includes potential for financial gain as well as loss, making it a speculative exposure. C. Pure risk arises only from contractual performance failures and excludes all other causes. D. Pure risk involves only the possibility of loss or no loss, with measurable probabilities that make it insurable. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is the definition of pure risk, which involves only loss or no loss outcomes and is insurable because probabilities can be measured. Reason A is not correct. Pure risk events are typically quantifiable and therefore insurable, so this description is incorrect. Reason B is not correct. This describes speculative risk, which involves potential gain and loss, not pure risk. Reason C is not correct. Pure risk is not limited to contractual failures. It covers any event with only loss or no loss outcomes. Question 14. In casualty underwriting, the term exposure unit refers to A. A standardized measure of risk quantity used as a basis for premium calculation. B. A deductible level selected by the insured before coverage applies. C. The maximum limit of insurance coverage provided by a policy. D. The frequency of loss events occurring per unit of time. The correct answer is A. The correct answer defines an exposure unit as the standard quantity of risk, such as payroll or vehicle count, upon which rates and premiums are based. Reason B is not correct. A deductible is an amount the insured pays toward a loss, not the unit used for premium calculation. Reason C is not correct. Coverage limit refers to the maximum payout, not the measurement of exposure for rating. Reason D is not correct. Loss frequency measures how often losses occur, not the unit used to quantify exposure for pricing. Question 15. A chemical manufacturing firm is concerned about the risk of toxic spills from its solvent-based cleaning process. To address this risk, management is evaluating 4 strategies. Which strategy best represents risk avoidance rather than risk reduction? A. Replace the solvent-based cleaning process with a water-based method that uses no toxic chemicals. B. Install secondary containment berms and leak detection sensors around solvent storage tanks. C. Provide employees with quarterly spill response training and personal protective equipment. D. Implement a preventive maintenance schedule to reduce the likelihood of equipment failure. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is the strategy that eliminates exposure to the hazard by replacing the solvent-based process entirely, which is risk avoidance. The other options involve measures that mitigate or reduce the hazard's impact without eliminating it. Reason B is not correct. This approach involves adding containment and detection controls, which reduce rather than eliminate the hazard. Reason C is not correct. Training and protective equipment reduce exposure potential but do not remove the underlying hazard. Reason D is not correct. Preventive maintenance reduces failure likelihood but does not eliminate the source of hazardous spills. Question 16. Which of the following statements best describes a primary distinction between a stock insurer and a mutual insurer? A. Mutual insurer policyholders have voting rights and may receive dividends, whereas stock insurer shareholders own the company and receive dividends. B. Stock insurer policyholders are considered company owners and receive dividend distributions. C. Stock insurers are owned by insureds and cannot issue dividends to external shareholders. D. Mutual insurers raise capital by selling stock to investors, while stock insurers rely on policyholder contributions for surplus. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is that mutual insurer policyholders both vote on corporate matters and share in surplus distributions, while stock insurers are owned by shareholders who receive dividends. Reason B is not correct. Stock insurer policyholders are not owners and do not receive dividends based on company surplus. Reason C is not correct. Stock insurers are owned by shareholders, not by insureds, and typically issue non-participating policies. Reason D is not correct. Mutual insurers do not raise capital by selling stock. They use policyholder surplus and retained earnings. Question 17. In the structure of a reciprocal insurer, each subscriber A. Transfers surplus to a central fund managed by a board of directors. B. Owns shares of stock that represent equity in the insurer's operations. C. Assumes part of every other subscriber's risk through a contractual exchange arrangement. D. Is liable only for premiums paid and has no voting rights in management. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is that each subscriber in a reciprocal insurer exchanges insurance contracts to assume portions of one another's risks, under the supervision of an attorney-in-fact. Reason A is not correct. Subscribers in a reciprocal exchange do not transfer surplus to a board-managed fund, but share risk directly. Reason B is not correct. Reciprocal subscribers are not stockholders and do not hold equity shares in the insurer. Reason D is not correct. Subscribers have both voting rights in the exchange and risk beyond the premiums they pay. Question 18. A mid-size manufacturing firm is considering forming a captive insurer to cover its product liability exposures. Which of the following best describes the primary business purpose of a captive insurer in this context? A. Underwrite and service insurance policies for unrelated companies to generate additional revenue. B. Provide excess reinsurance coverage above specified attachment points for catastrophic losses. C. Allow the parent company to retain and finance its own risks as a risk management tool. D. Transfer all liability exposures to an external insurer to enhance the firm's creditworthiness. The correct answer is C. The correct answer describes how a captive insurer is formed by its parent company to enable retention and self-financing of risk exposures, improving control over underwriting and cost management. Reason A is not correct. This describes characteristics of a commercial insurer selling to unrelated parties, rather than a captive designed to serve its parent. Reason B is not correct. Captives are not primarily reinsurance vehicles. They focus on first-dollar retention rather than excess coverage. Reason D is not correct. Captive insurers do not transfer risk to outsiders, but rather internalize and finance the parent's own exposures. Question 19. Which statement most accurately distinguishes express authority from implied authority in the context of an insurance producer's relationship with an insurer? A. Express authority is explicitly conferred by the insurer, whereas implied authority consists of actions reasonably necessary to carry out the express grant. B. Express authority is an insurer's direct grant via statute, while implied authority arises when statutes allow agents to perform extra tasks. C. Express authority arises when third parties reasonably believe the agent has power, while implied authority is granted orally or in writing. D. Express authority includes all customary acts in the insurer's course of business, while implied authority must be documented in the producer agreement. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is that express authority is the insurer's explicit grant, and implied authority consists of those actions reasonably necessary to fulfill the express grant. Reason B is not correct. This option confuses implied authority with statutory permissions rather than actions necessary to perform an express grant. Reason C is not correct. This choice mixes up apparent authority with implied authority and mislabels what constitutes each. Reason D is not correct. This option reverses the definitions by attributing customary acts to express authority and documentation to implied authority. Question 20. Which of the following best describes how apparent authority is created for an insurance producer? A. When the insurer explicitly delegates binding power in its producer agreement, and the producer subsequently communicates that power to applicants. B. When tasks not expressly granted are inferred based on customary insurer-producer practices, even if the insurer has not directly authorized them. C. Insurer actions or statements lead a reasonable third party to believe the producer has authority, and that third party relies on those representations. D. When an oral agreement between the insurer and the producer grants additional powers that extend beyond the written contract terms. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is that apparent authority arises from insurer conduct or statements that cause a reasonable third party to rely on the producer's perceived power. Reason A is not correct. This describes express authority and does not involve third-party perceptions or reliance. Reason B is not correct. This describes implied authority based on customary practices rather than third-party belief. Reason D is not correct. This refers to an oral grant and extends express authority. It does not involve third-party reliance on insurer conduct. Enjoyed this practice test? Tap like, hit subscribe, and share it with a classmate. Got a question we should tweak? Comment below, we read them all. Find full practice exam books in the description or at ExamPrep.School.